Have you ever laid awake at night wondering if you'll become successful, if you'll ever make it in life? And so many people feel like a failure. And today we're going to be talking about stories from real people on Reddit that aren't polished success stories that you see on Instagram. These are real accounts of entrepreneurs that went from nothing, failed over and over again, and somehow found their way through darkness. So get comfortable and make sure you like, share this, and hype this up so your algorithm can promote more positive content to you. Let's begin. So picture this. It's 2008. The economy is collapsing. Businesses are closing left and right. Banks are failing. People are losing their homes. And in the middle of all of this chaos, a woman decides to start a business. Now, she has no business degree, no books, no gurus, no podcast telling her the 10 steps to success. Just a simple idea, a printer, and absolute desperation to make something work. She didn't spend months researching. She didn't build a 5-year business plan. She didn't do any of these things, right? She just did it. With her husband, she printed some flyers, some basic flyers, had a price and a phone number, and that was it. They put them up around town and waited. And then something incredible happened, right? The phone actually rang. Then it rang again. People started calling. They needed the service that she was offering, and they were willing to pay. Just like that, she had customers and she was in business. While most people would have spent years preparing to launch and reading books, watching YouTube videos, she didn't wait for the perfect moment. And I can relate to this 100% because I started a YouTube channel with my friends, and we literally were all smoking weed in a circle, and we had an idea for a YouTube channel. And that day I created the art, the thumbnail, the logo, and I started creating the first videos on my phone, right? And we all started doing it together. And every single day since then, I was working on that YouTube channel and I got it monetized, and I made thousands of dollars per month within the first 3 months versus, people spending years having this idea and it never really working. And from there, that launched my whole career to even, helping companies do YouTube. But going back to the story, she understood something that most people really don't when they start out, is that you have to just start, even when you don't feel ready. The early days weren't glamorous. She didn't have a fancy office. She didn't have any employees. It was just literally her and her husband working directly with customers and doing the work themselves. But a very important thing that they did that separated them from every other business that often fails is that they listened. Every customer that talked to them, they paid attention, not just to what the customer was saying about the service, but what they failed to mention, what other problems they had, what their needs were and when they weren't getting met. And when they added extra services, customers mentioned that they also needed that service. So great, now we do X. If a customer says, do you handle, shipping or whatever? They said, yeah, we can figure out how to do that. And their business grew organically, shaped by real demand from real customers, not what some business book or guru said they should offer. And this is in 2009. So the recession was full swing. But their business, it kept growing, all because she took the risk. And while other businesses were closing, they weren't trying to be fancy. They weren't trying to revolutionize an industry. They were just genuinely helping people and charging a fair price for it. Year after year, their business grew, not because of some genius marketing strategy or because they had an MBA. They grew because they were willing to do the hard work, and they were earnest and hungry for the opportunity and truly trying to help people. And fast forward to 2022, 13 years after starting their business with nothing but printed flyers, they were able to retire. Their net worth was upwards of $7 million. But the story doesn't end there, because they didn't walk away counting their money. Their business was generating wealth even when they stepped back. And by this last year, their net worth had climbed past $10 million, a whopping $10 million from flyers that they decided to print, all because of a recession, right? And now they travel, they build things for fun, they have the freedom to spend their time however they want. And when someone asks them how they did it, they don't have a complicated answer or, fancy frameworks or even a course, all these course gurus selling you a dream. They simply just listened and started and kept persevering. They really had an eye and an ear for what the market and people wanted. And often what her husband says, based on his reflection, is that for us now, it's not a question about making money. They can do whatever and they know they will be all right. They just want to have fun, travel, and build stuff, right? And that's what real financial freedom is. It's not anxiety about money or, hustling 24/7. And all of this just started because she decided to take the risk back in 2008. right? They didn't wait for the economy to recover. They took action, all because this woman decided to print some flyers. It changed the entire course of her life. So what's stopping you from starting that business or starting the YouTube channel, like I said, or doing the thing, even if it doesn't look perfect to start for the first few months, first year? But if you continue to persevere and you just take immediate action, you can succeed. Now, story 2 is about how one person was in a dire situation, kept getting rejected, and had a young family to provide for. So now imagine getting laid off from your job. You start sending out resumes, you go to interviews, nothing. 0 callbacks, 0 offers. Sounds very familiar in this economy. You have a family that depends on you, kids who need to eat, and bills that need to be paid, and you have no job, right? That's a horrible situation where most people would panic. They take any job they could get just to have something or anything come in. They'd settle and compromise. But this man chose a different path, a very risky and terrifying path. With no other options, he became an entrepreneur. Not because he really wanted to, but because he was forced to. He had 0 sales background, and I mean absolutely 0. He's never sold anything. Imagine that. Most of you probably have skills or experience where you've probably never started a YouTube channel or created content, but you're doing it just to provide for your family. And now he has built a business that would depend on his ability to sell, which doesn't exist. The learning curve was brutal for him. He fumbled through early sales calls. He literally put a potential client to sleep during one of his pitches, which is wild. Can you imagine someone being so bored by your sales call that they fall asleep? While you're trying to save your family from financial ruin, and you're so bad at selling, you bore someone into unconsciousness. Most people would have quit right there, would have just taken that as a sign that entrepreneurship wasn't good for them and they should go get a regular job. But he didn't quit because failure wasn't an option. His family was depending on it. So he ended up finding a business partner, someone who was just as desperate as him and just as committed as working hard. And together they went out to make their first few sales. Day 1 of their first real sales push was rejection. Second prospect, rejection. Third, rejection. Fourth, fifth, sixth, rejection. And they got multiple rejections in a row. They went home crushed, devastated. They had families counting on them, and they couldn't even get a single yes. They seriously considered quitting, just like most people would. Maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe they just weren't cut out for this. But after a few days of despair, they made a decision that changed everything. They sat down together and analyzed what had actually happened. Feedback, right? That's the most important thing of growing as a content creator or business. They wrote down every single objection that they heard and every reason why people said no. And they crafted better responses to each objection. They didn't give up. They learned, they adapted, and improved. And then they went back out there. After 7 weeks, they finally landed their first client. That's nearly 2 months of constant rejection and failure. Most people would have given up after 2 weeks. Hell, most people probably would have given up after day 1, but they didn't. And that first client changed everything. Not just because of the money, but it helps, but because it proved to them that they could do this, that they could sell, and that their business could actually work. The sale gave them confidence and momentum. From there, the business grew. Each sale got a little bit easier. A pitch became much more smooth and natural, and the skills that they had, they never thought they would be able to cultivate. They developed them through sheer necessity and relentless practice. He looks back at it now and talks about how hard entrepreneurship really is. He says that entrepreneurship is 5 times harder than most people think. And it's not for everyone, but if you stick with it, it can be incredibly rewarding, not just financially. 5 times harder than you think. And some people even say that, like Alex Hormozi, that it's 100 times more than you need to do than you actually think. You might think you need to create 100 videos on TikTok, or maybe you need to do 1,000. You don't need to do 100 sales calls. You need to do 1,000. And most people already know that entrepreneurship is hard, but it's actually multiples harder than you think. The roller coaster, being in the dark, and being blindfolded until you can finally start to see some light. But here's what makes his story more powerful, is that he didn't have any special skills or natural talent. He wasn't a salesperson. He didn't have any savings to fall back on, and he had a family to provide for. He didn't have industry connections or all that. He just had desperation and a young family to feed and a will that was ironclad, and he refused to quit. And that's simply enough. His advice to others is simple but profound. Only seek advice from those who have been where you want to go. Not gurus selling courses on stuff they don't do, but people who have actually achieved success and experienced the same struggles as you. So if you're facing rejection in sales and business, even just dating, you have to keep persevering because one, it's a numbers game, but two, eventually you're going to see a breakthrough in your mindset and you're going to become numb. And this is what some people call rejection therapy. And it's extremely powerful if you persevere. This is the story of how I almost killed my first business before it even got started. And to put it simply, it's because I didn't charge enough. See, when you're just starting out, there's this voice in your head that says, who am I to charge premium prices? I'm nobody. I'm just getting started. I should be grateful that anyone wants to work with me at all. So I set my prices low, like really low. Figured I'd make it up with volume. But I was wrong. I was drowning. I was working my ass off for pennies and I couldn't afford to hire help. I couldn't afford decent equipment. I couldn't afford anything actually, all because I was too scared to charge what I was worth. Here's what I learned. Don't be the highest. Don't be the lowest. Be somewhere in the middle where you can actually survive and grow. But pricing wasn't even my biggest mistake. I wasted years and years trying to do everything myself because I didn't know how to hire good people. I thought hiring was about finding people with the right skills or the right resume and even the best experience. But it's not. It's really all about character and work ethic, whether someone's actually fun to work with, because those things aren't, teachable, but they're the most important things. Skills that you can teach, a good attitude, and having work ethic aren't super common to come across. It took me way too long to figure that out. And then there was this weird period where business was doing well, but I was bored. So I started messing with the formula and trying new things and adding complexity, all because I was bored. And that was a huge mistake. If it gets boring, you're doing it well. You made it in business. Don't mess with the formula because you're bored. And I had to learn that the hard way. You want to know why I made it? Because I'm still here when so many others failed. I was willing to tolerate any stress level, to risk financial ruin, to essentially die trying. And if I was going to fail, I needed to know I threw everything and gave my all at this. There was nothing left that I could create, but it's not everything, right? That's the bare minimum to survive. You have to keep learning. You have to never stop. I've read hundreds of books on business at that point. I basically gave myself an MBA through self-education. And one of the most important things I did is that I treated my team like gold. I paid them well, I respected them, and I appreciated them. But if someone wasn't performing, they didn't stay. I learned to be kind but firm. Because here's the truth, you'll lose your top talent if you let the mediocre ones stick around. Your best people will leave if they see that you're tolerating bad and poor performance. You are the enforcer, and it's uncomfortable if you're a good person, but it's necessary. Then marketing. Marketing was a completely another thing. Like, everyone told me, focus on digital marketing, Instagram, Facebook ads, etc. But that didn't work for my business. I wasted money on it. What worked was thinking about where my actual clients were and getting their attention. Sometimes the old ways work better. Sometimes you just have to get creative. And through all of this, I learned to manage stress, stay humble, and to put others first. But one of the biggest things I learned is losing my ego. An ego will kill your business faster than anything. And I've seen it happen over and over again. People get successful, they get an ego, they stop listening, they stop learning, and then they crash and burn. And I'm still here because I kept my ego in check, kept learning, and kept growing. And this is an important lesson for a lot of small entrepreneurs and people just trying to grow in general, is that you can't do everything yourself. It takes a village to raise a child, which is an African proverb, but it really is true from a business perspective and just succeeding overall in life. You can't succeed in a silo. You have to talk to people, work with people. You have to have people to buy your stuff, right? We exist in a society where other people are going to dictate your success. And oftentimes, if you don't know how to manage people, especially with the most important person being yourself, you're going to crash and burn. If you can't manage yourself, if you can't manage your ego, you're going to think that you can do everything yourself like this person did.